This is the MMA Plug on Mile High Sports. Here's your host, Jordan Kurtz.
Welcome back to the MMA Plug on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We're going to dive into this weekend's UFC 297 preview. It's the first pay-per-view of the 2024 lineup for the UFC. It's going down this weekend up in Canada, which may have some of its own issues within the week. We shall see, depending on the antics of particular fighters that are on the card. But in the middleweight title fight, you have a matchup between Sean Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis. Now, the current middleweight champion, Sean Strickland, has kind of became a people's champion in his own way. You know, Sean is very boisterous. He's outspoken. He's certainly got his own mixed bag of issues and dark elements to him. But his ability to be vulnerable and be honest with some of his issues has created levels of endearment surrounding him that have appealed to a lot of different crowds out there. And just given the nature of just how Sean is, he's a very just rugged, blue-collar, working-class type of guy, man's man, you know, loves shooting guns, riding motorcycles, fighting. He classified himself specifically as, like, I'm the 90s, guys. I'm hot chicks in bikinis. I'm explosions. I'm Patrick Swayze. Like, went on that whole rant on Food Truck Diaries at one point in time. And I think that Sean, being such a radical on the opposite end of the spectrum of such a pacified society that we've grown to have as a whole in 2023, has also drawn a lot of people to him. He went out there last fall in enemy territory on short notice and completely shocked the world. Very few people out there gave Sean Strickland a chance against Israel Adesanya. And Sean didn't just beat him. You know, sometimes when you have those matchups where, you know, just saying one for example's sake out there, you have a Conor McGregor against Jose Aldo where he clips him in 13 seconds with a knockout. Well, you didn't really get to see a whole ton in that way just because of the timing, precision, and placement of that shot, ending it right away. You may be able to, some people would say it's a one-off of a fluke. You know, if they ran it back, would it have gone the same exact way? Blah, blah, blah. But Sean Strickland dominated Israel Adesanya for 25 minutes. Dropped him, had him hurt in a couple of situations. So, you know, it was a completely one-sided affair that myself included was shocked by. Now, to give credit where credit's due, on the flip side, I didn't think that Dricus was going to do what he did to Robert Whittaker. I thought that Robert Whittaker was going to go out there and be able to very handily beat Dricus, just because I maintain the stance that Dricus has a lot of holes in his game. He's very rigid. He's very robotic. He's not fluid within his movements, but he's big. He's strong. He's powerful. He has the ability to weather the storm and walk through some shots on the process to implementing his game plan. Now that he had the surgery to be able to breathe better from his nose, you know, that did look to have somewhat of a visible benefit against Whittaker. You know, he didn't look completely gassed out immediately, but, you know, I don't know. When you're talking about fighting a guy like Sean Strickland, I think that the big question in this matchup, because of the vitriol that's been built up between them, is Sean is known for being and when Sean is at his best, he's very calm within the storm. But the level of vitriol, the animosity, they already fought in the crowd at UFC 296 just a month ago. They exchanged a lot of insults and heavy barbs at the press conference before that. does that animosity play into the psyche of Sean Strickland, and does that make him go out there and in turn fight emotional? If Sean goes out there and fights emotional, that could certainly be cause for concern, and that could be problems. But if Sean is able to stay calm, maybe I'm just completely underestimating Dricus. But yeah, does he have the puncher's chance of being able to, to land a big shot because he is a big, strong dude? Sure, but I also think that should Dricus get the takedown, it's not like Sean is a slouch on the ground. Sean is a very underrated grappler. He has a black belt that he just famously or just went viral on social media for throwing in the trash. But that is an accolade behind his name. That is a skill that's on his resume. I think that can't go underappreciated in this matchup. So if you're asking me, I say that the main event is an and still situation. But will it even get to that point? Will it get past the press conference? Will it get past them having to just walk by and see each other in the hotel lobby? And does something get said that triggers one of them off, and it becomes a spill out right then and there in the hotel lobby? Sean has no regard or no care of where it happens. We might talk a little bit more about that later. But moving on to the co-main event, this is a women's bantamweight title fight. Now, in back-to-back pay-per-view cards, Colorado has the opportunity to bring home the first undisputed title for a Colorado native. This time now as Colorado Springs native, Raquel Pennington gets her second shot at UFC Gold. First time was against Amanda Nunes back in 2018. Rocky has rallied around, and she's earned her shot at gold here again in 2024. A stalwart of the bantamweight division, a true gangster every time that she goes in there. I mean, there's been times where Rocky's been hurt in fights, damaged her hands, whatever. She just continues to scrap and continues to throw down. And, to me, as a purist or as a fight fan, you can't not love someone who just has that dog mentality the way that Raquel Pennington does. She does have her hands full as she's going to be taking on Mayra Bueno Silva, or should we say Chitara? All jokes aside, Mayra Bueno Silva's last fight against Holly Holm, which was a victory, was since overturned due to a hot test. Make of that what you will, and her immediately coming off of that tainted supplement situation to getting a title shot, it just is what it is. That kind of speaks more to the state of the division in the wake of the fallout of Ronda more than anything, I would say. But this is the first step to getting that division back being built up and having a champion to then take that vacant throne right now. In the feature fight, we have another Colorado veteran traveling to the Great North to take on a rising prospect as the Elevation Fight Team longtime standout Neil Magny and top-ranked welterweight himself takes on Mike Malott. Now, Mike Malott is a guy who doesn't have a ton of fights for being over 30, but he is very impressive in a lot of his showings and a lot of his outings. I think that him going up against a veteran like Neil Magny is going to kind of tell us exactly where he's at. It's hard for me to ever count Neil Magny out of a fight or to ever say that Neil Magny is not going to be that guy. And I'm staying riding with the home team on this one, but I do have to say that, if you can find good value on that Mike Malott pick, might not be the worst thing to stash in a parlay. But again, me personally, I have the heavy lean towards the hometown guy here in Neil Magny. Some other fights on the card for you to take a look at and keep a record of. You have Chris Curtis, who's going to be taking on Power Bar Marc-Andre Barrial. That is a middleweight fight. Chris Curtis, the action man, he's a great dude. Spent some time with him here in this camp. He was out here in Denver for a little bit around a week and a half, somewhere around in there toward the end of 2023. Just an all-around great dude. Strong as a bull, very talented all the way around. He's going to be fighting a guy who has seemingly no end to his gas tank as well in the Power Bar. But the way that Chris Curtis has been through the fire throughout the course of his career, and the way that he has the ability to finish fights, on top of him being a strong counterpuncher, I think that opens up the opportunity off of the pressure from Marc-Andre Barriault for him to set up that kill shot. I like the action on a Chris Curtis finish there in that fight. A couple other big fights on the card. You have Arnold Allen taking on Movsar Evloev. That is going to be a top-ranked featherweight matchup. The big question for me is, how does Arnold Allen bounce back after his setback against Max Holloway? On one hand, you got to say, hey, man, it's Max Holloway. That's one of the all-time greats. That's a featherweight GOAT, if you will. Speaking of which, since the beginning of that division being recognized in the UFC, there's been 4 featherweight champions in its entire existence. That's pretty crazy as far as that goes. But I digress. This matchup, as we see Allen taking on the undefeated 17-0 Movsar, I think that Movsar is one of those guys who has top-tier talent, but he just doesn't get as much of the hype as maybe some of his foreign counterparts because he doesn't have some of the impressive finishes on his highlight reel the way that some of the other foreign guys who have a lot of hype, especially the undefeated prospects, say like Shavkat Rakhmonov, who is undefeated with all finishes. I think that's where the disconnect kind of comes there as far as him being, 17-0, ranked in the top 15, undefeated guy, but he just doesn't have those sort of highlights behind his reel, if you will. A fight that I think is under the radar to be an absolute banger and a potential fight of the night sleeper just based off of the striking prowess of each of them is Charles Air Jourdain and Sean Woodson. This is a featherweight fight. Sean Woodson, former pro boxer, crazy dimensions to try to figure out in the featherweight division. The dude is almost alien-like with his long limbs, and I think that that's going to be an interesting equation to try to see somebody who is the dynamic striker like Charles Jourdain try to figure out. Josh and I used to always talk about it. Any single event where you add Charles Jourdain on the card, that is a must-see type of fight. That guy goes out there and he puts on an exciting performance after exciting performance, whether it's win or loss. That's a dude who is going to go out there and give it his all, especially fighting back at home. You could be sure that he's going to have an inspired effort to go out there and put on a performance for that Canadian crowd. You have Brad Katona taking on Garrett Armfield. This is a bantamweight matchup. Katona is the only 2-time Ultimate Fighter champion in the show's history. He is going to be taking on the very tough Garrett Armfield. But again, Katona, he trains out of SBG in Ireland, but he's back home fighting for this opportunity. I think that it was, dare I say, a mistake that the UFC didn't re-sign him after his first tenure. He goes on, has a couple of very successful fights after the UFC, gets the opportunity on The Ultimate Fighter, wins his way back into the organization. I mean, you can't not love somebody who has just continued to go out there and win. Getting re-signed might not have been in his control, but going out there and winning and continuing to prove his value within the division and within the fighting marketplace as a whole, that was something in his control. He just kept on going out there and winning. So I like the story behind Brad Katona more than anything. You have a matchup of a couple of lady black belts as Jillian Robertson takes on Polyana Viana. Now, both of these ladies have had some of their recent ups and downs, but I think that the all-around more skilled fighter in this matchup is Polyana. I don't know that if this goes to the ground, if either one of them might be able to find a finish against each other just because they're both very quality grapplers. But if Polyana keeps the fight on the feet, I do believe that she is much more violent standing up than Jillian is. Could be some decent value there on a TKO from Polyana Viana for you. And then we have, on the early prelims, Malcolm Gordon taking on Jimmy the Brick Flick. This is a flyweight fight. Now, Guys, Jimmy Flick, at one point, he was the talk of the town, LFA champion, successful campaign on Dana White's Contender Series, comes into the UFC right away against Cody Turden and has an impressive finish, but then he retired. He was gone from the game for a couple of years. After his hiatus of a couple of years, he's made his return since, and unfortunately for Jimmy, it has not gone his way. He's 0-2 with 2 TKO losses, but he does have the opportunity to right the ship against another guy who's currently fighting a 2-fight skid, who's on the worst half of 2 finishes, a knockout and an armbar respectively, and Malcolm Gordon. What do you guys think of the card? Do you have any lines or any that you're particular on, or a matchup that you think that maybe we didn't talk enough about that you wanted to hear more of? Let me know on social media. That's me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Stick around after the break. We're going to be talking some more current events out there. This is the MMA Plug on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. That helps us continue to produce this original MMA content and bring it for you every single week. Tune in to the MMA Plug on 98.1 FM, Mile High Sports Radio.